Okay, good evening. I'd like to call to order the 21st meeting of fiscal year 2020 of the Milton Planning Board. Board members will all introduce ourselves. I'm Cheryl Tagayas, the chair.
April Anderson, member.
Kathleen O'Donnell, member.
Rich Beeler, member.
Danny Swinson, secretary.
And then we have staff, please staff.
Bill Clark, Planning Director.
Allison Quinn, Assistant Planner.
Julia
Okay.
Getman, clerk.
Thank you, Julia. Sorry, I cut you off there. We have a couple of guests and we'll get to them as we get to them on the agenda. But before we get to those items, I would like to say that in accordance with the governor's order suspending certain provisions of the open meeting law relating to the 2020 novel coronavirus outbreak emergency, this meeting of the Milton Planning Board is being held remotely utilizing the Zoom virtual meeting software. The login and call-in information for this meeting, Bill, if you'll scroll up on that agenda so we can see that. So anyone who is watching could still, okay, there you have. I think it's clearer though if you scroll back up to the top and you see it right under where the room, it says room. There you go. Okay, so so that's the login and the call-in information now seen on the screen. This meeting is being televised live via Milton Access Television, and it's also live streaming on their website. It will also be available on their website for on-demand access sometime after the meeting. Real-time public comment can be made via the audio feature of this platform, whether joining by computer, mobile device, or phone. Town Planner Bill Clark will be controlling the mute feature until I ask for public comment, but board members will not be muted. Okay, so the first item on our agenda is our next meeting dates. Those are May 28th, June 11th, and June 25th. Town meeting is scheduled for June 15th, and there's going to be, I understand this week, the select board has voted to have another town meeting on July 27th for the articles that were removed from the warrant for the June 15th meeting. And those include the zoning articles. We talked last time about the possibility of doing a webinar prior to town meeting. And I'd just like to note that we're going to put that on the agenda, sort of the detail of how that might work on the agenda for our meeting on May 28th. So any questions from board members about the upcoming meetings?
Nope.
Cheryl, can you just repeat the July date?
Yes, July 27th.
Thank you.
No,
And I
excuse me.
just, did I
It's
get
going
that
to
one?
be July 28th. It's going to be Tuesday, July 28th.
Okay,
Selectmen changed it last night
okay,
because they were concerned that the Monday may potentially interfere with people's vacations, and they felt that having it on a Tuesday, they had a better shot of having everybody home.
okay, thank you,
They
Bill,
do,
for that.
they do expect it to be one night. They expect it to be 8 to 9 articles. And the closing of the warrant for that will be June 3rd.
So Bill, our understanding is that by having had the articles removed from the June 15th, we now need to resubmit articles by June 3rd for the
Yes,
for the July 28th meeting, right?
yes.
Okay. So when we get to the Milton Village overlay discussion, we can talk about that schedule a little bit more.
Correct.
Okay.
We'll be turning in the new product that comes out of this and any next discussion. Yes.
Right. Okay. So Bill, I'm sorry, did someone have a question?
If
No.
somebody just put up their hand, I can figure out who it is that's talking. April's.
I think what you might have heard was my when I turned on the cable access, it's
Gosh.
Jenny Swenson. When I turned on the cable access, the audio was up. I think that's what might have thrown you.
There you go.
Sorry about that.
Okay, thank you, Donna. Okay,
Sorry about that.
Okay.
so let's see, do we have Kevin on, Bill? Yes, Kevin's
Yes.
on. So I'm going to do is take a couple of things out of order on the agenda. We're going to come back to the meeting minutes. And we're going to go next to the discussion with town council on open meeting law issues and emails and deliberations. And right after that, we're going to jump down to old business, East Milton Square Steering Committee discussion with planning consultant Judy Barrett. And then we'll go back and finish things in order, okay? All right, so Kevin Freitag, town council, please take over.
You, Madam Chair, can you hear me?
Barely.
Hold on just a second. With the cursor.
I cannot hear anything.
I think he's
He's still trying.
you hear me now?
changing.
Oh, okay.
Is that better, Madam Chair?
Better, but you're still a little bit faint.
Try something else here. All right, how does that sound?
Better.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you, Madam Chair, for having me here tonight, and good evening, members of the Planning Board. The Chair asked me to make a brief presentation tonight regarding the open meeting law, and more specifically, the topic of deliberation and email, is that deliberation is defined within the open meeting law. This discussion, I think, is particularly appropriate now, given the large amount of remote participation that boards are participating in order to conduct their business. I think that this presentation is only going to last about 20 minutes. It's broken into 3 parts. The first part is just a very brief overview of the open meeting law and those specific sections as they relate to deliberations, and specifically how the term deliberations is defined within the open meeting law. I'll also then provide a summary of several recent open meeting law determinations that have been made by the Attorney General's office that concern deliberation. And finally, there'll be a short opportunity for you to ask some questions. I would ask that you limit those questions, though, to the open meeting law sections of the open meeting law that we discussed tonight, as well as the determinations that we discuss. If any of you have any specific questions or hypotheticals that you would like to address with me, I'm happy to discuss those with you directly after the meeting and at your convenience. I'd also like to point out that, as many of you know, and as the chair just actually referenced in her opening remarks, the governor recently, at the beginning of April, signed into law Chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020. That act, among other things, provided relief to boards, public bodies, in terms of their requirements under the open meeting law. It did not change any of the requirements that we're going to discuss tonight, specifically regarding deliberations. So you don't need to worry about whether or not any recent circumstances have changed any sections of the open meeting law as they relate to deliberations. They have not. So having said that, the open meeting law generally refers to General Laws, Chapter 30A, Sections 18 through 25. As you all know, the open meeting law requires that a meeting of a public body be noticed and open to the public unless an executive session is convened. A meeting is defined in relevant part as a deliberation by a public body with respect to any matter within the body's jurisdiction. I would caution you that that phrase, within the body's jurisdiction, is read quite broadly by the Attorney General's office. Deliberation itself is defined within the open meeting law as an oral or written communication through any medium, including electronic mail, between or among a quorum of a public body on any public business within its jurisdiction. The exception to the deliberation rule, though, is that deliberation does not include the distribution of procedural meeting materials or the distribution of reports or documents that may be discussed at a meeting, provided, and here's the key language of this exception, provided that no opinion of a member is expressed. For purposes of the open meeting law, a quorum is a simple majority of the members of a public body. In the planning board's instance, you're a 5-member board, 3 members constitute a quorum. Before turning to some specific examples, I would just like to point out that the deliberation in general includes what the Attorney General's office commonly refers to as non-contemporaneous communications. How about that for legalese for you? But what that really means is that's like the old game of telephone tag where I pick up the phone and I call Jane, Jane calls Mike, Mike calls Tim. If each of us were members of the planning board and we were discussing, although not all at the same time, a topic that was within our jurisdiction or within the business that we handle, that would be a violation of the open meeting law. It also covers, deliberations also cover the use of a third person. So if I call Tim, who's not a member of the planning board, he's just my neighbor, and I say, Tim, call planning board member Sue and ask her a question for me. And he does that. And then Sue says to my neighbor, well, call Kevin back and tell him this. And by the way, also call another member of the planning board and get their input. Even though Tim's not a member of the my neighbor's not a member of the planning board, and no quorum of the planning board is speaking to each other at the same time, by using that third party to communicate, you are in fact deliberating. And if that deliberation takes place among a quorum, even if it's not all at the same time, you're deliberating under the open meeting law, and that deliberation would need to be held at a public meeting, and holding it outside of a public meeting would be a violation of the open meeting law. So that's the general framework of the open meeting law as it relates specifically to deliberations. Turning to some recent and relevant determinations of the Attorney General's office regarding the open meeting law, I think is helpful in this instance. Just by way of background, as most of you know, if there is a complaint filed by any individual regarding what they perceive to be a violation of the open meeting law, that complaint goes to the chair of the board. The chair of the board shares it with the members. The chair can then either respond directly or authorize someone like town council to respond on behalf of the board. The board responds, that response goes to the complainant, and a copy of it goes to the Attorney General's office. If the complainant is not satisfied with the response, they file with the Attorney General's office. The Attorney General's office investigates and then executes or completes a determination, a written determination. Those determinations are all available on the Attorney General's website. They actually are all searchable by keyword, which is extremely helpful. So to the extent that any of you may have questions and I'm not available, or you just wish to take them up on your own, you can look at the Attorney General's website and you can search through all of the Attorney General's determinations on open meeting law complaints. It's an incredibly helpful and easy to access database, and I suggest you take a look at it if you have the time. Along with that, of course, the Attorney General's office also has an open meeting law guide, which I'm sure you've all seen. That's also very helpful. Going specifically to some recent determinations, this year, there was a situation where a chairman of a board of appeals emailed a draft decision upholding a cease and desist order to the complainant, the building inspector, the ZBA chair, and copied the remaining members of the board. So the question was, and the complaint was filed to address whether or not the sending of a draft opinion to all the members was in fact a deliberation. And there was an even further sort of nuance to it in that the draft determination included, of course, the opinions of the board and also referenced anticipated votes of members. Now, it's important to point out that in this case, the members at the meeting preceding this email, so preceding this draft, had discussed this matter fully and had actually indicated which way they would vote. That draft determination, or excuse me, that draft decision and emailing it to all of the members of the board by the chairman was not considered to be a violation of the open meeting law. It was not considered to be a deliberation. Again, the decision itself relied on the rule that distribution of a document to be discussed at a board's meeting is, generally speaking, allowed. It is an exception to the deliberation rule. In this case, because the decision was a memorialization of conversations that had already taken place, including the way that certain members might vote, it was not considered a deliberation, and it was not an open meeting violation. Had that draft decision, for instance, though, said something like, you know, it opined on what some members of the board, how they might vote, despite the fact that they hadn't actually expressed an opinion as to how they would vote, that would have been a different determination, I think. But as it stood, draft decision, not an open meeting law violation. There was another recent decision that dealt with comments made by members of a board regarding public media posts. In fact, there was a video that was posted on a social media webpage of a discussion, a portion of the planning board's meeting. And some member of the public had commented on the manner in which the meeting was being conducted and the way that the chair was acting. And the chair then sent a link to that web page to other members of the board and commented on the comments that were being made about the way that he conducted the meeting. And a board member actually replied and made additional comments. And in that case, the determination was that in fact was a deliberation, because the comments that were being made by the chair were an extension of his deliberations at the meeting that had been videoed. So he was responding and saying something like, no, that person got it wrong. I was really saying this. This is what I believe. And then someone from the board chimed in and added additional comment and opinion. All of those communications by the chair and by the responding board member were considered to be deliberations and were violations of the open meeting law. That case also had some interesting dicta in it that described that distribution of meeting minutes ahead of a public meeting is permissible so long as the minutes simply memorialize deliberation that took place at a preceding open meeting. That's pretty straightforward. Here's a little extra nuance though. If you send an email, the attachments to that email, if opinion is expressed by a board member in an attachment to an email, but not in the actual email, doesn't matter. It's still going to be considered deliberation. So if it's in the email proper or in the attachment, if the opinion is in one or both, it's still going to be considered deliberation. The key here again is that expression of opinion. It doesn't matter the way that you express it, if it's directly in the email itself or in an attachment or some other manner. If you express an opinion regarding matters that are before the board, that's going to be considered deliberation. Another recent determination dealt with factual questions and scheduling concerns. Scheduling concerns, questions about scheduling asked between board members, all the board members, even within a quorum, not a problem. That's not deliberation. If you're talking about when can we meet, what time, what days, that's not going to be considered to be a violation of the open meeting law. If you have factual questions that you wanted to ask of fellow board members and you sent out an email to all the board members saying, I don't remember such and such, does anybody remember what was said? The guidance from the AG's office there is that rather than send that out to the rest of the board members, that you would simply reach out to perhaps, in this case, Bill Clark or Allison Quinn, or another member that could provide you sort of a one-on-one response to a factual question. What was the address that we were talking about the other night? Do you remember what the nature of the business, or someone made such and such comment, do you remember what they said? Those questions are best directed to someone that's not in the board or left to discussion at an open meeting. Again, there are a number of recent decisions that deal with this issue of opinions. That's the circumstance you see, I think, most often that trips up members of boards is when they express opinions. So if there's, for instance, if there's a draft decision that a board member sends out, as we just discussed, that's okay. as long as it's a memorialization of things that have happened in an open meeting. But if people respond to that draft decision with opinion, hey, this looks great, but I don't agree with you on this piece, or I think you've misunderstood this part of the presentation. Any opinion about that draft decision, which is really an opinion about perhaps the matter as a whole that's before the planning board, that's going to be considered a deliberation. And if you do it outside of the context of an open meeting, you're going to have a problem. Draft meeting minutes, again, that's not going to be considered a deliberation. And finally, requests between board members to add agenda items to an upcoming meeting, that's not going to be a violation of the open meeting. That's not going to be considered to be deliberation. If member Sue wants something to be on the agenda for the meeting and it's not on the first agenda, but there's time to revise it in compliance with the open meeting law, an email to the board member saying, I'd like to put this on the meeting agenda is fine. If you were to go one step further and then express an opinion about the topic that you want to have put on the agenda, now you're going to move into deliberation and you're going to have a problem. You're going to be in violation of the open meeting law. So that is a sort of a recap, if you will, of I think the most pertinent sections of the open meeting law, as well as some recent decisions that I think highlight the areas that are particularly related to deliberations. Again, I think if you remember nothing else from this presentation, the most important word is opinion. You can't take opinion or express opinion outside of a public meeting within a quorum of the board. If you do that regarding a matter that's within the business or the jurisdiction of the board, you're going to be considered to be deliberating and you could be in violation of the open meeting law. So with that, I'll just sort of turn to the last part of the presentation, which is a response to any questions that any members of the board might have.
Kevin, I have one for you. If we were having our meetings in person and we had, let's just use an example of a draft decision, and we had an individual member had edits that member wanted the rest of the board to discuss at that meeting. Those can't be emailed in advance per your guidance. Is that correct?
I think that's right, Madam Chair. I think that edits are opinions. So those opinions should be discussed at the meeting.
So where we might then bring those in person, right? So a hard copy to distribute to our fellow board members in person. Now we can't do that. So we're left with trying to get those comments to the person just in time for the meeting, I guess. I'm just wondering if there's any guidance on that.
I think that your best approach there would probably be to have your edits to whatever it is that you're going to discuss prepared and ready to go, so that when you do get to the meeting, you're able to discuss those with the rest of the board in public as precisely as possible.
So emailing them just before the meeting would be acceptable?
No, I don't believe it would be. I think that would be an expression of opinion regarding a matter before the board, and that would need to be reserved for the meeting itself. Unless it is a memorialization of comments that were made at a previous meeting. So if there was a draft decision that was discussed at a meeting and every member of the board said it had comments about or edits that they would like to see made to that draft decision, and then one member of the board was charged with incorporating those comments into a new draft decision, they could do that and then forward that revised decision to all the members of the board before its next meeting, so long as they didn't themselves express an opinion about the decision or the revisions that they had memorialized in the copy that they were sending to their fellow board members.
So how do we get the documents to one another in time to discuss them? Or do you have to deliver them 2 weeks before your meeting at the meeting that you're having? Let's say if we wanted to have a discussion about a document that has to be distributed at our meeting now for a discussion in 2 weeks?
No, if you have a document that you would like to discuss at a meeting and you would like everyone to review that document before the meeting to be prepared to discuss it. You can forward that document to the members of the board so long as, for instance, if it was a plan that had been submitted by an applicant and you want everyone to review the plan before the meeting, you can submit that to every member of the board and they can review it and be ready to discuss it at the next meeting. That's not a problem. And you could submit that at any time to the members of the board before the meeting. That's not a problem. The issue would be if someone responds to that and starts to discuss the plan. This looks good. This doesn't seem right. I have concerns about this. Those types of things would be considered deliberations and should be reserved for the meeting itself.
So in the case then of a decision, a draft decision is written, members are going to need to be able to see the draft decision in order to be able to discuss it, right? So they're going to receive that decision via email. That's okay. You can see that. It could even have revisions in it, but as long as you don't respond to it until the meeting itself.
Well, I think you have to back up a little bit. If you have a draft decision, that would presumably be based on comments that were made during an open meeting. So the board deliberates and charts a course that it's going to take on a particular application or matter. And then someone is charged with drafting a decision based on that discussion. If that draft is a memorialization of things that have already been discussed and no more, then that is perfectly fine and can be put together and emailed out to the board so that they can review it. And then each member of the board should review it, comment, especially if they feel that maybe something was misinterpreted that they said at a meeting and they don't think that the draft accurately represents their opinion. They would want to have those thoughts and comments prepared. And then as soon as the open meeting begins, those comments could be made by each member of the board.
But in practicality with the remote meetings, that means you'd have to have everybody potentially sharing their screen and look at 5 different sets of comments on a particular document at one time, right?
I'm not sure. There probably are a couple of different ways to do it, but I suppose just like at a meeting, an in-person meeting, that the chair acknowledges a member of the board. That board member says, "I reviewed the draft decision and I don't agree with X, Y, and Z." And so in the virtual setting, I think the same thing would happen. The chair could say, "I assume everyone's received a copy of the draft decision. Is there any discussion regarding the contents of it? I see that such and such member has, raised their hand and said that they do have comments. I'm going to acknowledge that person." And then that person speaks to the draft decision and the comments that they have considered and express them at that time.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. Does anyone else have questions?
No.
No, okay, seeing none.
I'm sorry.
Denny, yes?
I'm sorry, it's Denny. I did have a question for Kevin. I was reading on the state website that the general remedy, I was wondering if you could talk a little bit about the remedy when a mistake happens. I was reading that the remedy was to release the emails, but I wanted to hear your thoughts on that.
I think that all depends on the circumstances. Anytime a complaint is made, the complainant has the opportunity to request certain types of relief in the complaint itself. And the AG's office considers that as well as what it believes is the appropriate remedy. And I think that the remedy typically fits the circumstances as the AG sees it. So I know certainly to your point, there are some instances where the AG has said if there were communications that appeared to be happening offline, that were deliberations, that perhaps the appropriate thing to do was to make those emails public. But I'm hesitant to put any sort of blanket remedy on a violation of the open meeting law because the AG's office doesn't do it that way. They look at it seemingly on a case-by-case specific basis and they try to determine what's right and who was involved and whether or not there was any intent involved to violate the open meeting law. So it's different in each decision based on the facts and circumstances of the complaint itself.
Thank you, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Okay, anyone else? Kevin, thank you for joining us this evening.
You're very welcome. And again, if anybody has any questions, you can always email me, or please feel free to reach out and give me a call. I'm happy to speak with anybody about this issue.
Thanks very much, Kevin.
You're welcome.
Okay, I said we were going to go to old business, Judy Barrett, but I do want to make a statement since it is 7:15. And on our agenda, we have two public hearings. At 7:10, the 131 Elliott Street amended special permit. We will take that just after Judy Barrett's update for us. But at this time, for the 7:15, 919 Blue Hill Ave, Little Sprouts site plan approval, which is continued from April 9th, I'm going to make a statement that pursuant to Chapter 53 of the Acts of 2020, the chair declares that the public hearing for 919 Blue Hill Ave, Little Sprouts is continued until May 28th at 7:05 p.m. If the governor has not lifted the declaration of emergency by that time, the hearing may be continued. The applicant has been informed of this decision and is agreeable. Okay, so now we will go to item 6, old business, East Milton Square Steering Committee discussion with planning consultant Judy Barrett. Thank you for your patience, Judy, and thanks for joining us tonight.
Better,
There.
better unmute myself.
There you go.
Otherwise, I'll be, gabbing away here and not realizing that anybody.
There you go.
So thank you. I wanted to check in, first of all, to say we're in tough times here with COVID-19 and so forth, but we are anxious to continue working on the project with the folks in East Milton and for the board. We had, the last time we had a meeting, which was, I think, just before the world changed, the working group had a discussion session with the prospective developer of the Falcone property and had a chance to ask some questions, which was all fine. And you know what's going on with the 40B, so we don't need to talk about it, other than I think that process with whatever's going to happen to it is going to happen. And we have no control over the timeline. We don't know what's going to happen with mass housing. But meanwhile, there's a neighborhood and a neighborhood that needs to do some real thinking about what it wants to see, what its vision is of that whole neighborhood area, which is not just that one site. So we're anxious to kind of resume working with them despite the limitations of being able to meet and so forth. Both Dodson Flinker and I have been doing quite a few meetings virtually with lots of people, and it actually is fun. But I think that both Peter and I feel like it would be really advantageous for this process if we expanded the size of the working group or steering committee or whatever you're calling them. Because the whole point of kind of having that body to work with was to be able to give the consultants a chance to vet some ideas with a group that kind of is relatively representative of different ideas and interests in that neighborhood, get some direction and buy-in or just direction from them, I guess, about what they think might be successful with the rest of the neighborhood, so that when we go back to kind of a final public meeting, it isn't just the consultants saying, "Boy, we got a great idea for you." There's been an opportunity to have a discussion with folks in the neighborhood who have a stake in how this all turns out and who will be there long after we're gone. So we would really like to see the board put some more people on that committee. And so when we get them back together again, there's like kind of an expanded group.
Judy, have you considered if there's like a profile of the additional members that you would be trying to add?
Well, looking at this, what's all in the neighborhood, I think that, there's a couple of churches over there. I think having someone from clergy involved would be great, because they know that they see a cross section of the neighborhood in their parish, and I think sometimes planners forget to include the clergy in projects like this that affect the neighborhood. So I'd love to see someone from that group. I think a few more business people would be really helpful. It would be great if we could find a resident or two who haven't necessarily been super involved with, I don't know. And I'm not. This isn't going to come out right. I was about to say not super involved with the neighborhood association, but that's not the point. The point is just maybe somebody who's got, because I have really huge respect for those people and they've been great to us, but I think maybe just somebody who represents perhaps a different connection to the town. Maybe that's what I want to say. You know, people who aren't necessarily, you know, active in town government or something, but might be more active in other aspects of the community. I think that one thing that would be extremely helpful to this group and to us and to the future of this project, if we could get a designee from the Affordable Housing Trust on this committee, I think it would be great. I don't know what your policies and practices are in Milton about having designees from other boards, but you know, it just makes sense to me that you know, given the kind of ideas that are in the master plan around East Milton, what's there, the plain reality that whether it's a 40B or a 40R or something else, there are opportunities in East Milton to accommodate affordability, and having somebody from that group involved, I think, would be really helpful.
Members, questions for Judy? Yes, for Judy.
Well, I know that Pastor Shelley from the East Milton Congregational Church has expressed an interest in, you know, more affordable housing in the area, you know, as part of her sort of mission of that parish. I don't, so I know that she's had some interest in that. So she might be somebody to reach out to.
Okay.
And I don't really see anybody from St. Agatha's being particularly engaged.
So what do you think about, I see we have Elaine Carroll from the Milton Times joining us here tonight. I know in the past there have been committees where there's sort of a call went out to residents in the town. If you have an interest in this, you know, submit an email or send an email to the town planner. And if you said, you know, here's the kind of background we might be interested in having, please let us know if you've got that kind of background or why you were interested in it. So Judy, what do you think about that approach?
I think that's a great idea, because then we're not assuming, you know, who's like the right fit, but we can sort of describe kind of what might be good categories of interest to involve, but let people kind of organically volunteer. To me, and I think if Peter were on this, I think he'd agree with me that really is the ideal way to go.
So maybe we do that. Maybe we post it on the town website. Maybe we can ask it to go out on the, I think the town puts out information on the via Facebook.
Yeah.
So maybe we could go those multiple routes.
Yep.
Board members have thoughts about that?
Makes sense.
No, I think that's a great idea.
Okay. So Judy, would you like to just maybe send Bill and Allison just a little, you know, what you might think in terms of profile? I mean, like a mix of people,
Yep.
you know, of certain categories or characterizations, and then they can craft something that could go.
I have a feeling you asked me to do this already, and it just completely went over my head. Despite the fact that the world is sort of absorbed by COVID-19 by now, we are actually in the middle of trying to get some plans done with HUD deadlines of tomorrow for some cities, and it's just been crazy in here. So hearing you ask me this question, I thought, she asked me this 2 weeks ago. So yes, I promise, I apologize to the rest of the board. I will take care of this. I will take care of it tomorrow. I will send it out because we really would like to get them together, and Peter and I are game to work with them, virtual or not. It's there's plenty of work to do, and I think, you know, I want to get back to where we all started with this, which is this really isn't about just one site. it's really about this whole neighborhood and what is it that people want to see and how can we begin to bring them perhaps closer to market reality so that they can actually get something in their neighborhood over time that meets their expectations. I do think there's a lot of work that needs to be done with some of the folks in the neighborhood about what's financially realistic. But you know, there's time to do that. So, okay.
Bill, you had your hand raised, I believe.
I did. I did notice that some of the comments that came were women, and I think that's something that's missing from the committee right now is a woman. Right now, you've got five men and no women. So yes, Pastor Shelley would be really good. I can think of a couple of women from the business district, from the chamber, say,
Yep.
or businesses. I can think of a woman from the Affordable Housing Trust. I do think we need to kind of even the scale a little bit with some females.
I think we could do outreach to the people that you mentioned, Bill, and then still put out a sort of a larger call because,
Absolutely.
you know, there may be people. In fact, the way I got involved in planning board years ago was a call like that when Temple Shalom was looking to sell their property, and they were looking for a committee, and I volunteered. But the way I found it was in the Milton Times. So
Now
anyway.
look what, 10 years later.
Right, so maybe we're going to recruit through this method too, right?
There you go.
I just think it's a really good idea. I mean, yeah, we can provide kind of a profile, but I think just letting people organically kind of respond to, a call to arms would be great.
Sure.
Okay, so we could set a time frame. Let's say, once it gets out there, we have a few weeks to get people a chance to see it and reply.
I think that's fine.
Okay, and then maybe Bill, once you collect those, you and Allison can talk with Judy and maybe come back to us with who you think you'd recommend to us.
Yes.
I think that would be great.
Sound good, everyone?
Mhm.
Rich?
Yep.
Okay, great. All right, unless there's anything else, we'll let you get back to your HUD applications, Judy.
Oh, I just want them over. I just want them over. So, all right, well,
Good luck and thank you.
nice to see everybody.
All
Thanks,
right,
Judy.
Thanks, Judy.
Talk to you soon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Okay, folks, now we'll open our 7:10 public hearing for 131 Elliott Street, the amended special permit. We spoke about this at our last meeting, and I think we're familiar with what is being requested, but for those who may be watching and not have seen that, I'd like for Bill or Allison to give us an overview of what the requested amendments are.
There are three.
Can you share screen, Bill, with the documents? While you're sharing screen, I can say what the three are, keep things moving along.
Right.
There is request to reduce the parking space count by 1 due to the addition of a fire stair. The other is a change in the site lighting. And the third is a request to waive the requirement for a screening of mechanical equipment on the roof. As Kathleen pointed out at our last meeting, the special permit itself requires strict compliance. And so while all of us felt it was, we were supportive of the parking reduction of 1, especially given that they still meet the requirements in the zoning for parking. So I don't think we need to have a lot of discussion about that, but we can. Bill, you're looking up the memo or the plan?
This is the memo right now. Can you see that?
No, we see your,
Still, okay.
yeah, like it was before. Was there a question? Denny, did I see you have a question?
Yeah, I was just wondering if Bill or Mike could link my video into the meeting. Okay, I'm signed in both ways now.
I see
I'm on the
you,
phone and,
but you don't
oh,
see
you
the,
see me, okay.
Yeah,
That's fine. Okay, all right, never mind.
do you see
carry
the,
on.
do you see the documents?
I see the documents, I'm good.
Okay, great, okay.
Okay, thank you.
Mhm. So what we talked about with the lighting last time, also in terms of the site lighting, had to do with the fact that there are certain streetlights already in place, and that it didn't. Sorry, my phone's ringing here. It didn't necessarily make sense to have the quantities distributed the way that the special permit required them. So that another item was that there were 2 pole lights, one in the courtyard and one in the landscape courtyard, if you will. One is hardscape and one's landscape. And they are planning to use building mounted fixtures and bollards to light those spaces. And then the third had to do with reducing the number of parking lots in the parking lot itself, but still providing adequate lighting levels without spill to the neighbors. And they have, since we discussed it, changed the height of those poles back to what was required at 12 feet rather than what they submitted at 15 feet. So
There is a fourth item. The fourth
Okay.
item was to make the change in the special permit language that says that construction will be followed strictly, strict following of the special permit. And we were going to allow for de minimis changes to be able to be implemented by the building commissioner.
that was a request that we thought of, not one
Yes.
that they asked for.
right.
Correct. But we're looking at the 3, and I know that Joe Walsh, who is the architect for 131, he's here too. I cannot unmute him. He has to unmute himself.
Oh, no, I'm here. I don't know if you can hear me.
There you go.
Yes,
Yes, we can.
thank you.
Okay.
Yes.
So did we summarize the request in a way that reflects what you submitted to us, Mr. Walsh?
Yes, it did.
Okay. So maybe you want to just give us an overview of the need for the stair, just quickly, the reason you want to change the lighting, and then the thoughts on the screening.
Sure. Starting with the parking, I mean, the original special permit was 10 years ago, and the building plans submitted at that time were pretty schematic. And when we took over the project, we realized that the first floor didn't have the required means of egress, 2 means of egress. And the only way to get that was to add a stair on the north side of the building, on the trolley side, that went down through the ground floor and exited out there. And by inserting that stair, we lost 2 parking spaces at that level. We were able to rework the parking spaces on the first floor level to gain an additional space. So we were down by 1 space total, which was, so we went from 88 total spaces, both inside and outside the building, to 87 spaces total. And the 87 spaces actually met what the parking requirements by zoning required for us. So that's sort of how we arrived at that. I don't know if there's any questions on that.
Bill, can you, before he goes to the lighting, can you pull up the plan, the photometric plan? And maybe while you're pulling that up, Mr. Walsh, you can talk about the roof plan and the screening.
Sure. The special permit called for screening around all the equipment on the roof. So most of the equipment that we have up there are fairly small condensers, probably not more than 2 feet high. And there are one or two other larger ventilation pieces up there. But we think that for the most part, none of that will be really visible from the street. So what we're requesting is once we get up to constructing the roof, that we put mock-ups, the correct size for all the equipment up there, and have either a planning board representative or planning department representative walk around the building, see if anything is visible, and if, you know, the consensus is that it needs to be screened, and then we'll screen it. We prefer not to, just because of all the roof penetrations that a screen up there would entail. But, you know, we're willing to do it. It just, we don't think it's really going to be required.
So in our meeting 3 weeks ago, rather, we did talk about the possibility of viewing not just from the street, but viewing from neighboring properties. And so I think from my perspective anyway, I would be willing to look at a mock-up, but you're not ready for that. So I'm not sure that we would want to amend the special permit until we could see it. I don't know about other board members. Have any comments on that?
That was my recollection, that we were supposed to be seeing some kind of mock-up, but we didn't. And so I thought we had sort of said, well, when we can see the mock-up, we'll think about it then, but wouldn't be doing it now.
Okay, anyone else, board members?
No, I agree.
Okay. Okay, there's then, now if we could talk about the lighting plan, Mr. Walsh?
Sure. The original special permit called for a specific, well, minimum numbers of certain types of the decorative light fixtures, which is the ones that are the street lighting, you know, along Elliott Street and Central Ave. That I think it originally called for 7 total of them in various locations around the building, which seemed a little excessive and probably overlighting the area. So what we're proposing is to add one on Central Avenue where there isn't anything right now on that side of the street. And
can you point to that, Bill? It's right by the A, I believe, of Avenue.
Yes. It's a big square
Right.
to the left of the A.
There you go.
And then we're proposing to have 3 of those decorative lights along the Elliott Street side, equally spaced.
Right, so there's 2 existing lights on Central Ave, one at the corner and one by the trolley, is that right? So that the spacing would, wrapping from Central Ave around and up Elliott, would be relatively equal, right?
Yes. I think there's 2 on the opposite side of Central Ave.
But is there not one on the corner on this side of Central Ave?
I don't think there is right now, no.
Okay. Well, then if you're looking at what foot candle levels are at the sidewalk, so that's what the concern would be of these lights, right? So is your foot candle level being maintained as you go around the corner of Central Ave to Elliott?
There's roughly 1 foot candle. at the corner. So the 1 foot candle is the red line.
And how is it getting there? Where's the light coming from that's giving you that foot candle? If you don't have a fixture.
No, I'm mistaken. There are 2 existing
Okay.
light fixtures. Let me see. It's yes, one right there,
One right
and
here.
then and right there. Yes.
So if I'm looking at the corner up by the trolley, am I reading that the foot candle level there is about 4 point something? Is that right?
Those are coming from the trolley track lights.
Okay. And so from when you say 1 is what you're trying to accomplish along the sidewalk?
Yes. There is an existing light right at the property line with the trolley tracks right there. Yes.
Okay.
Watching over my shoulder to make sure I'm looking at the same thing I'm showing you.
Can you scroll down a little bit, Bill, so we can see Elliott Street a bit more? Thank you. Well, along Elliott, we've got 3.5 foot candles, and around the corner, we're down to 1. So I guess I wonder if eliminating the 2 fixtures is dropping that foot candle level so that it's going to be dark on the corner.
On the corner of Elliott and Central,
Right.
not up by the trolley tracks.
No, right, where it's down to 0.8.
Right in here.
Because if you look up by the one by Central Ave by the A, it's the foot candles are 2.5 to 3.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get to the corner, you're down to 0.8. You wrap around the corner, you're at 0.8 before you get back up to 3.5. 3.5 up Elliott. Well, how are we getting at 4 foot candles in the middle of the street? I'm not quite sure I'm following how that is working. Is that coming from a street across or from a fixture across Elliott?
There are lights on the opposite side. The decorative fixtures, I'm not sure how many go up on the opposite side.
Yeah, I'm looking on Google Earth, but it's an old picture.
It doesn't show those
No, it shows the one,
right
on
there.
the corner on Central, right before the passage, right before the crosswalk.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Right
there's 2 other ones on the opposite side of the street.
There should be one right in here.
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there-
No, there isn't. On this one, there isn't a picture of one. Oh, yeah, no, it's up around the corner on Central. I don't see one. I said, there's an old picture. Oh, yeah, I see it. It's right on the corner, right.
All right, so if there are 2 fixtures right on the corner, and those are town installed fixtures, maybe what we need to do is ask DPW to look at why those foot candle levels are relatively low there if they're comparable type of fixtures. But there doesn't seem to be a need to add a fixture in the middle of the curve, I guess is what I would say.
No, and I don't think you'd want it there for safety reasons either.
Right. Okay, so that's the street. Then there were a courtyard, a landscape area, and the parking lot.
Yes, so the courtyard area along Elliott Street, what we proposing is to install bollards there. I think they're only about 3.5 feet high, and the lights all pointed downward, just to give a sort of a general lighting to the walkway up to the entrance and the stair down to the lower level. And there's also some building mounted sconces at the main entrance there.
Any concern about that, anyone?
Cool.
No.
Okay, in the parking lot?
And the parking lot, we originally had 4, or was called for 4 fixtures there, and we reduced it to 2 fixtures. They're actually a better light than was available 10 years ago. They're LEDs and dark sky compliant, and it provides adequate lighting to the parking area without really any spillover to the adjacent property.
Okay, any questions or comments about that?
Nope.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walsh. Is there anyone participating who would like to provide any comment about this application to the board? If you can, I think there should be a feature. Bill, maybe you have to unmute everyone, or I can unmute all.
Or you can go to chat and raise your hand.
Okay. Chat and raise the hand. All right, so are we,
Everybody is unmuted.
okay. I'll ask again, is there anyone who would like to provide comment to the board on this application? Okay, seeing none. Board members, is there any further discussion about this application?
I had done a draft of special permit with Allison. Allison actually started it. I just, I don't know where that, I think it was sent out right before we met.
Yep.
And I would just ask the board members to look at the draft, and particularly with the language on addressing the sort of strict modifications, strict compliance with the permit.
Okay, so if we feel as if we have adequate information and are ready to make a decision, we can close the public hearing. If someone is,
Kathleen, did you send me that, or did you send me something for Milton Village?
I sent 2.
Sent 2.
Allison got it.
I did get it. I got it. I didn't get it, Kathleen, till 6:56, and I just
okay.
sent it to everyone. My apologies.
That's
But
right.
everyone should have just gotten it.
okay,
on.
so
on.
so while you're getting that up, Bill, if folks are ready, I would take a motion to close the public hearing.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, we'll need a roll call vote. And I think what I'm going to do now is say the name so we don't have to guess who's going to speak next, all right? So, Denny Swenson,
Yes.
April Anderson,
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell,
Yes.
Rich Beeler,
Yes.
and Cheryl Tagayas, yes. Okay. I think what I said earlier about the what my understanding from our last meeting, what we support, and we can see if that's what is Kathleen has and Allison have put in the draft is not to amend for the screening of the rooftop, but to approve the amendment for the revisions to the lighting plan and to the parking plans. And also to look at this language that Kathleen has drafted on changing from strict compliance to something along the lines of material compliance. So, Bill, have you been able to? We see like a nice blue screen. Have you been able to?
No, there's no attachment.
Okay.
I just texted Allison. I wasn't going to
All
tell
right,
her.
let me see if I can resend it to you, Bill. Hold on.
There's no attachment on there.
All right.
All
So we can either come back to review the draft, or we can review it at our next meeting if people want to have time to review it in between meetings. But in the meantime, we can table that and take up, I think, under new business, because Bill can give a report. Actually, Bill, you're searching your email. So who was going to give us the overview for the A&R? Was that you too, Bill?
That's me.
Okay.
First of all, if you're doing that one, I'm recusing myself from the 163 Woodland. The applicants are old friends of mine, so I will be muting myself.
Wait. Before
video.
you do that, I'm going to actually, because Bill's searching, I'm going to go back to the approval of the minutes, okay?
Oh, okay.
Because we've jumped around, and then I'll go to citizen speak before we do those new business while Bill's calling that up. Okay, so we are in need of getting the meeting minutes approved. We have a number of them. Edits did go.
I'm ready to go.
Circulated, and
I'm ready to go.
Okay.
I checked in with Julia, and we have to go all the way back to February 13th. So I'm ready to move to approve February 13th, 2020, February 27th, 2020, March 12th, 2020, March 26th, 2020, April 9th, 2020, April 23rd, 2020, all as amended.
is there a second?
Anyone want a second?
I'll
there?
second.
Is there any discussion?
Okay.
Nope.
Okay, so we'll do our roll call vote. I think we still need to do even for minutes. So Denny Swenson,
Yes.
April Anderson,
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell,
Yes.
Rich Beeler,
Yes.
and Cheryl Tugayas, yes. All right, thank you, Julia, for pushing us on getting that done and for drafting all of them for us. Okay, is there anyone on the call, and Bill, I guess we can try this again through the participants in the chat, for citizens speak. I anticipate under the Milton Village overlay bylaw that we may have one or two members of the Housing Committee or Affordable Housing Trust who will address us, like to address us. And if you prefer to do it now, I see Melinda on our meeting. You could do it now, Melinda, or you can wait until we get to that on the agenda.
Hi, Cheryl. It's Melinda, and I'm happy to do that now. I don't see Julie here, but I'm happy to do that.
Okay.
I don't know if the planning board received the communication from the Affordable Housing Trust and the Housing Committee, basically outlining our support for the zoning overlay. And we still feel that it's the most proactive way that we can work towards our goal for affordable housing, while also meeting some very other important goals, such as community preservation in the form of historic preservation and other public realm benefits. But of course, our first concern is housing, because that's what's under our purview. I don't know if you want me to go through the statement, or if you would like me to address particular features in the zoning that we worked on and we feel are the right direction to go in. Do you have a preference?
Did everyone received the statement, I think, late this afternoon? Is that right? Oh, good. Here we go. We have it. So I think, go ahead.
I think I sent it this morning.
This morning, okay. So what's the preference of members? Would you like Melinda to run through it? The other thing that I asked the committee to do was to review Alexander Whiteside's comments and suggestions relative to the affordable housing sections of the bylaw, and provide us their feedback. So, I think that Melinda will be doing that as well.
My preference would be to hear her response to Alex, or to the specific question about percentages and such.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
I did read the letter, and I thank you for it. I thought it was. I always like to hear from your committee, so thank you, Melinda.
Yes, so that's really our main response, is that the 12%, rather than just going to a straight 15%, is really the right target. Typically went to 15%, looking at the variable size of project, and I wish Julie were here better, but if we just went with 15%, it doesn't allow a developer to really have a range in which to work and really respond to what could be done on each particular site. 12% is better than 10%, of course, because that wouldn't keep us ahead of where we need to be. And I realize that 15% could possibly get us there. But in this case, we don't feel that having a range after the 12% for the bonus floor is really very confusing at all. Julie Kramer, who is an affordable housing developer, said that this is something that is done in other places and doesn't really cause any issues. But there wouldn't be a lot of incentive to put on an extra floor if we didn't have that extra percentage of 17 to 20%, I believe. So I don't know if that is that at all clear? Sorry. Are there follow-up?
Thank you.
And as far as the formula, his question about what, that the formula, I think he felt was convoluted, may have been the word he used.
Yes.
Did you have any thoughts about that?
Actually, in looking at, like, if you went and read through Boston's formulas, the fact that they're looking at cap rates and some other measures, interest rates, things like that, that is a lot more complicated. And if you look at the size of our staff and even our volunteer staff, Julie developed this, that formula really because it uses real research that's done for the QAP that qualified, oh gosh, now I can't remember. Not allotment, but allocation program. And that is those values, while they're only calculated their development costs, well, they're only developed every 2 years. They are done every 2 years, and so the feeling is that that really is much simpler. And we haven't heard from anyone else. We haven't heard from developers. A couple of people who are looking to do work under the zoning. And I know that Mr. Roberts, I believe that's his name, from Swift Hat House, he actually, I thought when I was in the meeting with him, he said the reason he wasn't using that zoning is because he wanted to move faster and he didn't want to wait for the zoning to be passed. So I understand that there are a couple of other people interested in using the zoning, and they have not expressed that same feeling. But I understood it, and yes, I used to be a commercial real estate appraiser, but I didn't do apartments and things like that. It was more like office buildings and gravel pits. But no one else seems to have had difficulty with it. Even people on the Affordable Housing Trust who maybe are more on the legal end. Granted, we do have a banker and 2 people who are in affordable housing. So so we haven't heard that from anyone else, and I understand that it's something of a personal perception issue as well, because we're saying, well, we feel that it's relatively simple, given that you are talking about ratios and financing and things like that, or ratios in buildings of market to affordable. So I don't think I have anything more to say on that at the moment, unless someone has a question.
Okay, thank you, Melinda. Questions?
What we didn't have in this zoning before was an ability to do payments in lieu. And when I sat in on the housing committee meeting on Monday, it seemed like that was something that you were looking for in terms of the inclusionary zoning provisions that we have in other kinds of permits. And so I was wondering whether we should have an ability to do payments in lieu in this particular overlay district.
Well, I mean, isn't that partly what the formula is for? Because while there is an inclusionary requirement of 12%, that additional 17 to, and I'm going to get it wrong, it's either 20 or 22. I should have that memorized, but that is where right. that payment in lieu could come in.
Right. That's what I was thinking.
So we do have that, but the real, I have to say, the Affordable Housing Trustees would not agree with allowing somebody just to give a payment in lieu in Milton Village. We really need affordable housing. We're not even at 5% on the SHI, but people need housing, and it's one of the right places for it, because we do have the trolley, and we are trying to make some inroads in getting service improved, and even improving bus service. Not only there, but everywhere. So yeah, I just don't think that it would serve us well to do that.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions from Melinda?
That improving bus service was one of the comments that was in the traffic mitigation report that the selectmen accepted last night.
Right.
Excellent. Okay, and I know that our state reps and state senator and the select board are supportive of and monitoring improvements to the trolley and making sure that the MBTA continues to operate. Something, whether it remains to be the kinds of cars that are there now or something else in the future, but do see that as being important to Milton. Okay, so Melinda, of course, you're welcome to stay on and hear what we discussed later, but I wanted to give you this chance to do this earlier. I know you're busy yourself, so thank you. And thanks to the other members of the committee for their work on this.
Well, thank you. I will convey that. And I have a graduation thing for my son, but if you want me, Cheryl, I'll keep my phone on and you can text me, okay?
If we have any questions, we'll text you, but I think we will try not to bother you. Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
Go
Good night,
Terriers.
everyone. Thanks.
Okay.
Good night, Melinda.
Good night.
All right, so is there anyone else who's participating who would like to address the board for this citizen speak? Okay, I don't see any. So we will now move to the new business of A&R for 167 Woodland Road, the property line shift. And Bill, you're going to take this, right?
Yes.
And I'm
right.
muting myself and
Kathleen's going to recuse herself. She's recusing herself because she's friendly.
She's gone.
Right, she's friends with the applicant. The planning board probably about 6 to 9 months ago approved this A&R line between these two properties, 153 and 167. Presently, what they want to do is they want to move the lines because of the easements and because of the driveway, the distance from the driveway. So all it is changing interior lines. There are no exterior lines being changed, only interior lines. It keeps the setback on the house and it takes into account the utility easements that are up in the front.
So
it is that simple.
So so staff recommendation, it meets all of the requirements?
It meets all the requirements of an A&R.
Okay, questions?
How many square feet will be in each lot now? I'm sorry. Okay, so there'll be 40,000 in each lot. Sorry,
There's more.
I'm looking
It's,
at the map.
they're double A.
Yeah, so lot
That
2
one's-
has 87.
It is
Okay, so
87,
there's
lot
still-
1 is 122.
Okay, so they have plenty. Okay, thank you.
So why are they coming back a second time for the revision?
Interior lot line changes because the lot line is too close to the driveway. 167 is selling the property next door, and the people just felt that, you know, it was too close. Can I have a little more land? The answer was yes.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
Nope.
All right, then I will entertain a motion to allow the town planner to endorse the plan as not requiring subdivision approval. Did I get that right, Bill?
Yes.
Okay. I'm sorry, so,
Now you need a
April?
roll call vote.
right, so April made the motion. Is there a second? All right, I will second it.
I'll second it.
Okay, Denny's got the second. Okay, we'll do our roll call vote. Denny Swenson,
Yes.
April Anderson,
Yes.
Rich Beeler,
Yes.
and Cheryl Tugayas, yes, and Kathleen O'Donnell is recused. So let's
4-0.
get her back.
401.
So
And I will sign tomorrow. Mr. Delaney and his lawyer are going
And
to
here
be
she
extremely thankful. They have a closing tomorrow.
Wow, okay, well, that's timing.
Well, it's been ready to go. It's just a matter of COVID.
Okay,
So it's been pushed back and pushed back and pushed back.
okay, so Kathleen, you're welcome back. Did you enjoy your time off?
I went and had dinner. Had a glass of wine. Yeah, good.
So last meeting, I mentioned that I had received a letter from the Dedham Westwood Water. I forget exactly what it was another term, district, Bill's going to cover this for us now.
Water district.
District, right?
Okay, I did send in the packet a comment that came back from, I talked to Mr. Berkeley, Chase Berkeley. Chase talked to a friend of his who runs the water division for DEP, and Adam Westwood letter. All right, now that's the letter, and I don't, everybody got an opportunity to see where it is. The district that we're talking about in Milton is a very tiny one. It is up in Hemingway Drive area, a little piece on Brush Hill Road. So we do not have any industrial in there. We have extremely limited housing development that's in there. Housing development that's in there would not be constrained. What this would do is it talks about the use of pesticides in that particular area. Milton doesn't use wells in that area, and Canton doesn't have any wells in this area. So we're not really doing wellhead protection. There's nothing that the town really needs to do. It is a requirement of the Dedham Westwood Water District that every 3 years they go out and they do due diligence of notifying abutting communities of their permit, and they can make requests of wellhead protection. It's not a necessity that Milton go and have this. I sent you an email that came from DEP to Chase, and it pretty much says the same thing that I just said. Denny has a question.
I had a question. Is this in the ACEC near me, Bill? Do you know?
Yes. Their water
And you said
district is
something
in
about-
the ACEC. Their wellheads are
That's
in
the
the
Burma
ACEC.
Road?
No, they're
Is that in no?
no, they're further over. They're more towards Westwood, Westwood Station.
I know what you mean. I hear you. Okay. I'm sorry, I didn't pick up on pesticides until you said that. I didn't see that in that, but go ahead. So
It's the application of pesticides, and we do not have, usually it's used more in industrial areas. We don't have that. There's no industrial within the town. And we don't have a lot of, we don't use a lot of heavy pesticides. In the only land we have there would be Flatley Field, and we don't heavily pesticide it. We have extremely.
So approving this won't mean that there will be now pesticide where there wasn't pesticide before.
No.
Okay,
No.
I just wanted to verify that.
No.
My neighbors would kill me if I didn't.
No.
So I
No.
think it was Chase's recommendation was that we didn't need to adopt anything differently in Milton, right?
Correct.
Okay.
I think that was actually DEP's recommendation, right?
Yes.
That was DEP's.
Yeah. So I just wanted to make everyone aware of this because it did come to me and it, rather than staff. So, but anybody have any questions?
Nope, I've seen them before.
Okay. All
No,
right.
but thank you for bringing it to our attention. And thanks for doing the
Yes, thank you.
Yes. So thank you. And thanks to Chase.
Okay.
On our behalf. Okay. Bill, did you locate now the email that Allison sent you with the draft of the amendment
Yes.
to the special permit? Okay. Can you pull that up?
I just put it in here. Oh, because it's here.
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Thank you to Kathleen for tracking down to the Registry of Deeds the First Amendment, because I couldn't locate it on any device that I have available to me at home. So that was a good starting point for us. Bill, you still have the same problem. You've got that.
Screen sharing. Go here. Second Amendment.
There we go.
Yeah, I don't see it. There it is. And I can make it
Perfect.
bigger so I can see it. Can you see that enough?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes, yes.
I'm gonna stop. Okay. Am I supposed to be doing something?
No, I think if, are members comfortable reading this tonight and taking a vote on it? Or do you want to have opportunity to read it and vote on it at our next meeting?
I'm comfortable voting on it tonight. I just want to see what the language says about the strict compliance. Are we on that part? Right?
If you go to the next page, it's on
To the arrow, Bill?
bottom,
There you go.
3,
There we go. Okay.
number 4. And so the only thing I did was I took out the first sentence, which said that there will be strict compliance.
Mm-hmm.
And then I kept all the rest of the language was the same until you get to the part where it's in the minor deviations may be permitted if in the opinion of the building commissioner, which deviations are insubstantial material compliance with the approved plans and the special permit. So that's the only change that's the only new language is that minor deviations.
Can I ask a question on the word are insubstantial? Shouldn't there be a hyphen between in and substantial?
No,
Okay.
they probably shouldn't have the word. It's not insubstantial. It's supposed to be deviations are, it's supposed to be such deviations are substantially
Non-substantial?
and materially in compliance with the approved plans. So we just have to fix the language on that, the grammar on that. It wasn't supposed to be insubstantial. It was supposed to be deviations.
Right. That's why I asked.
Yeah. So just fix that.
Okay.
To substantially and materially in compliance.
Yes.
Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you,
All right.
Kathleen.
Okay.
So thank you to Allison and to Kathleen for working on this. And Denny, did you have a question?
No, I just wanted to say thank you.
Okay.
I have one statement. After your vote, and if the vote is in the affirmative, we'll prepare it and send it around for signature.
Well, I would like to suggest that the motion include authorizing the town planner to sign on behalf of the board so that we don't all have to sign. So if everyone is comfortable, I'll entertain a motion to approve the decision as written with that minor amendment and then authorizing the town planner to sign on our behalf. Is there a second?
Second.
Wait, I'm sorry, who did the motion?
Kathleen.
You need
So
to do
that-
roll call. You need
Right,
to do
but-
roll call.
I will. April
Can I
made the
quickly
motion.
browse page? I'm
Sure.
sorry. Can I quickly browse page 2, the page before this, so I can see
Yeah.
I just wanted to browse it quickly.
Go ahead.
I'm fine. I think it looks really great. You guys can carry on.
So just for Julia, for the notes, the motion was made by April and it was seconded by Kathleen, and I will wait a moment to take the roll call vote.
Okay, I'm good.
Okay, all those in favor by roll call: Denny Swenson,
Yes.
April Anderson,
Yes.
Kathleen O'Donnell,
Yes.
Rich Beeler,
Yes.
and Cheryl Tagayas, yes. Thank you, Mr. Walsh, for staying with us.
Thank you.
And we will now move to old business and the discussion of the Milton Village overlay bylaw. As I mentioned at the outset, we have opportunity now to resubmit this article for inclusion in the warrant that would be for the July 27th town meeting. The date by which we have to do that, they would be June 3rd. So we have one meeting after tonight before that deadline. So we can go through, I think everyone received 3 weeks ago, or at least 3 weeks ago, Alex's comments in his 20-page memo and some 50 comments. And then my red line markup of revision to the article, which tied back to those comments. I made a few minor changes that did not tie to his comments. So I'm going to share my screen. Kathleen emailed just before the meeting a version which had a couple of changes that she made, which I have not seen, but that's what I'm going to call up on the share screen.
There were just actually just some typos that I had, the couple of typos that I'd fixed. And then
Can everybody see it?
the affordable housing.
Okay. All right. So do folks want to run through these point by point? Does that make sense? Okay. So I'm going to assume that's a yes. On the first edit to the arriving at the minimum lot size under which one could apply at current zoning at 3,500. There was a fair amount of review at the time that the zoning was drafted with the MAPC, so the Metropolitan Area Planning Council, and the Master Plan Implementation Committee to arrive at that. But I did take a look at which parcels would be affected if we change that to 7,500 square feet. Of course, Alex already pointed out that the Swift Hat House parcel on Adam Street would be one of those. I did not add that to this because he had already pointed it out. But I think importantly, it would exclude the building on Adam Street, which is the single-story building where Citizens is. And just quickly, I'm going to call up this. So it's, sorry, it would exclude, well, the building that's sort of cut off just to the left here. There we go. So that Citizens Bank building parcel is about 7,400 square feet, I think. And then another parcel it would exclude would be this Hayward Photography, which is up here. And then a third parcel, which I don't have a photo of, that lacks frontage, so it wouldn't be allowed if we add a frontage requirement. So it's back up in here off of High Street. So those are the parcels that would be impacted by it. By changing it to 4,000 square feet, it would remove that parcel up on High Street, but keep the Hayward Photography in and keep the Swift Hat in, because the two parcels for the Swift Hat House are 4,000 square feet. So does anyone have any comments about that revision?
So you would be, the final version would include 4,000 square feet and no less than 20 feet of frontage?
Right. Now,
okay.
I put 20 feet of frontage just to, Alex had suggested 50 feet, but some of our parcels in Milton Village that would apply otherwise are only 40 feet. And I thought if the purpose is just to give where you're measuring things from, then all we're trying to do is get a dimension in there. I don't think the intent is to exclude parcels otherwise.
Parcel in the business district doesn't need frontage if it's for business purposes.
But the,
Right.
I mean, he did have a
This is
point,
different overlay.
right? So he did have a point. You know, if we want to go into the details of his point, I can pull that up. Does anyone have an interest in doing that on the frontage?
No.
No.
No, I'm happy
Okay.
to accept the changes.
Okay, so then, so we'll move on, okay?
Mhm.
So Alex had suggested that we more specifically define the type of residential unit permitted, and not allow group homes or SROs, which is single room occupancies. Further in his comments to this red line version, he suggested that it be defined by having living space, you know, kitchen space, bathroom space, and one bedroom. I mean, I think that would exclude lofts, it would exclude studios, which I don't think is a good idea. Any thoughts? I did not make any suggested changes to this to reflect his concerns and comments. Does anybody wish
I
to?
agree with your language. I think it should just say that. I was opposed to the idea that you'd had to require a bedroom. Why wouldn't you have studios? Why wouldn't you have lofts that don't have to have one bedroom? And you can't control group homes. Those are excluded from zoning anyway. I mean, those are done as a matter of right under sort of, you know,
The Housing Act.
yeah, fair housing. So you can't be doing all that stuff. So I think we should just leave it the way it is.
Any other thoughts about that?
I agree with Kathleen.
Okay. All right, then we'll move on to discussion about the usable space in the ground floor. I did think there were some, having net is kind of a term that it's probably is not defined and not maybe widely known by all parties. So when looking at it, I think usable made sense to change it. And I thought it also made sense to define the ground floor being above the basement. So that made sense to me. Any thoughts about that?
Good change.
Good, okay.
And there was
Yeah,
just that
I think that's a
typo.
good change.
No
A typo, oh, sorry, okay.
basement.
Okay, thank you for picking that up.
Okay.
The comment about intermixing the words ground and first floor, is well taken, so that's changed here.
Mm-hmm.
And then sort of the definition of story, I think I felt there was
sorry,
some
Cheryl.
improvement here. Sorry?
I'm sorry, Cheryl. On 2B, I do understand your point. I did reach out to some of the neighborhood leadership and ask them if they could, you know, just alerting them that we are still having meetings on this, and if they were interested, they could reach out. Anyway, because of the pandemic and other things, I couldn't attend tonight. I understand your points. I just like to hear from the neighbors on some of these points. Will the meeting be kept open for them to provide any feedback after watching this meeting at the next meeting?
That was my thought.
Okay. All right.
Okay.
Thank you.
Mhm. And we can make this draft available on the town website, I would say, after our review of it tonight.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
Okay.
Yep.
So we were on the term story.
You're on page 2C, 3C.
Right, so story. Story is important in definition because it's tied to grade, and with such a steep slope, what somebody might think of as a story might be defined as basement. And that kind of came up at 131 Elliott. You know, somebody might say, well, that's a 5-story building, but the part of the floor that faces central is actually considered basement because the majority of the floor is below grade. So it's important to get the definition correct. And so I thought that there was some suggested language that made sense to include here.
I thought it was good. And I know that, I mean, Alex was talking about, I think, access to the basement and saying that the basement shouldn't have, you know, no commercial use in the basement. And I thought, well, a standard, you know, commercial tenant on the ground floor might be using the space in the basement for storage or whatever, and that's going to be commercial use. So I didn't see why we would say you couldn't do that in the basement.
Right, I did not include that change. I did exclude the residential. I think that made sense.
Yeah.
Because I agree with you that if you think about Newbury Street, for example, you know, there's plenty of commercial use in basement space there, or or just two-story space. So it might be, even if you had a small cafe, you would probably, you could have refrigerated space down there for,
Yeah, you got, you know,
all sorts of stuff.
somewhere.
Right. So, so any concern or comment about, any further comment about that? Okay.
I think it's an improvement what you mean.
Okay. And I will say that some language is directly taken from Alex and some I modified. So it's a hybrid. Then on the setbacks, I thought again, a good point about a historic building that may have existing windows. And I think we may have a condition like that. And I think that, you know, our interest had been in this to not do anything that would be detrimental to historic buildings or existing buildings. So, so some language there relates to that. Both on the side and the rear. And then the point about a setback on Canton Ave, there's really two properties that applies to. It's 5 Canton Ave, and then I think the other one's 17, which is where the office building is. On 5 Canton Ave, Alex had suggested a 20-foot setback, and I think if you did that, then you may end up pushing the volume of building towards the rear. And that's where you have single-family homes. And I had a concern about, you can't reduce the size of the footprint of these properties so much that you don't get redevelopment either. So but I felt there's been a lot of comment about the concern of scale on Canton Avenue, so that putting in some setback there would make sense. So I did an average of 15. And I based that on the build-out analysis that I did, which had an average of 15. Some cases it's 10, you know, some cases. So as the building rounds the corner, it kind of opens up a little bit and doesn't put the building all the way to the sidewalk.
Yeah, I'd be concerned about 20 feet being decided to be a taking by the property owner. I mean, that's a pretty substantial change to what the existing zoning is.
Yeah, so then I looked at he had also a reference to an abutting residential district, and that would apply more to the 17 Canton Ave. That abutting residential district, I think is an RC, and it only has a 10-foot side yard setback requirement. So I put that in here as 10 and didn't think it should be any more restrictive than what's already there.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, so that's the floor area ratio. This is something I think was a good catch. It was in the bonus area, but not in the baseline part of the zoning. So any question or comment about that?
No, that's good.
Okay. And then I think also kind of making accommodation for High Street versus Adams Street or Canton Ave even, having the first floor height be a little bit lower when you're not on Adams Street makes sense to me as well. Any comment about that?
That's fine.
Okay. then the next one has to do again with consistency on describing that ground floor. And then we get to the district improvement incentive, another good catch in terms of actually now that we have a article for naming the fund itself, that we actually put it in.
Yep.
And then while in planning world, public realm is a term, is common. I think pointing out that there could be maybe infrastructure also, particularly with the landing area, that might be beneficial to apply these funds towards. So taking out realm and just putting in improvements kind of gives more flexibility.
Yep.
Okay, and then again, sort of a good.
I'm sorry. I'm just behind you.
Okay.
On the setbacks. So I guess it's D. Alex had a comment about the possibility of existing non-fireproof walls.
Was that in
is that
his?
Something we should give.
Well,
in his comment.
That's why.
Alex,
Well, that's why I put in about the. Well, an existing building that that doesn't meet the code. There's no requirement for an adjoining property to have to design its building to sort of correct a problem for an adjacent property. So in terms of fire code, I think I don't think you can do that kind of a penalty, but I do think it made sense to require the 6 feet away if that wall had windows. So if that wall were just a non-fire rated wall, the building code requires the new building, if it's within, let's say they put it on the property line, their new wall, that building, that wall would have to be a 3-hour rated wall. It has to stand on its own, separate from the building next to it. Then if the further away from the property line that new building goes, the rating of that wall goes down. But it'll still have to be a fire rated wall on the new construction because it's not going to be set back far enough to not have it. It would have to be something like 30 feet to set back to not have an exterior rating on those walls. But it's the building code that dictates that, not the zoning. But what we're trying to accommodate, I think the important part of accommodating is a historic building that has windows when it's close to the property line, right? Because if we put a new building right there with a 3-hour wall, blocking those windows, then we're not being sort of sensitive to what we said, which is to help preserve the historic properties in the neighborhood. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
As long as you're not taking and making the zoning and the building code conflict with each other.
No, we're just requiring a 6-foot setback here. If the building, the setback says 6 feet if you, it's either 0 or 6 feet, right? So here we're saying if that building has windows and it's just, an existing building, then you have to be 6 feet. We're not giving an option, that's all.
Okay.
So I think it's within the zoning. Kathleen, do you have any thought about that?
No, I think so. I mean, you can't conflict with the building code anyway, so,
Right. The fire rating part's covered in the building code.
Yeah.
Right.
That's why I didn't address it here.
I don't think we need to. It's in
No.
a six in the building code.
Yeah, okay.
I mean, you can conflict, but the building code is going to supersede what we do. So
Exactly.
All right, so Denny, we good to
Thank you.
move back?
I'm sorry I took us back. No,
No.
thank you for going back with me.
All right, no problem. Okay, so we were on the district improvement incentive, and we had talked about the naming the fund. And then on the public realm portion of it is more explicit language, I think, that makes sense about if a developer doesn't undertake the construction themselves, that monies would go into the fund.
Yeah, but you can cross out the part where it says into a newly established district fund, because you've already got the name of the fund in there.
So just cross out which part?
in the second paragraph under A, it says, the shall require that a payment be made into a newly established district fund. But we
Yeah.
have the name of the fund, so you
So
should just cross out
Made into the.
the Milton Village District Improvement Revolving Fund.
Okay, well, let me see. That didn't track the change. Let's see. All right, do you mind if I do it without? Oh, let me see. Never mind, I'm gonna track the change. Hold on.
Why don't you just highlight it and check it later?
Yeah, it's just a type, it's just a typographical.
All right, I'll highlight it. All right. Okay. Again, naming the fund.
Might want to put name the funds. You're gonna see delete. You're just gonna delete it.
All right. No, the fund name is there.
Okay,
See?
okay, it's already there.
Yeah.
Okay, never mind, never mind.
Okay.
Thank you.
Now, Kathleen, you deleted further here. Okay, do you want to?
Well, here's a question. In the original draft, we had and/or a contribution to the town's affordable housing trust. And listening to Melinda just now, she was saying that the Affordable Housing Trust wouldn't agree to take payments in lieu in this district.
Well, they don't want to take it for the baseline 12%, right?
Okay.
And I would agree with that, actually.
All right. So would I. But so this
But this is addressing the incentive. We talked about,
incentive,
they
yeah,
do
okay.
support having an option for the bonus
Yeah.
to be a payment, not the baseline though.
okay. I just wanted to
So-
make sure I understood that. Okay.
Okay, so we're fine here?
Yep.
With what you've suggested, right? Okay.
Yep.
Okay, so the next one was under the historic preservation incentive, and Alex had suggested deleting what is deleted here, and it was always something I was somewhat concerned about, so I think I would support deleting it. Any comments,
Yep.
anyone? Okay. Let's see, again, naming the fund, this time on the historic preservation. And then on the bonus incentive calculation, I don't think Melinda mentioned this, but I was on a call with Melinda and Julie Kramer of the Affordable Housing Trust. And they did have some concerns about this change. They didn't want this to be something that some future planning board would reduce down to something, too little. So I don't know, there was some thought about giving a range instead of just leaving it as reasonable and appropriate. So I don't know if anyone has any thoughts about this. We asked them for a formula.
Yeah.
They came up with a formula, and that's, what we've got here. But do we want to?
Well, some of the times I was looking at some other examples and some other districts and other towns, and they were just, it was like a flat out what the development cost was for the unit, for an affordable unit. So if it costs you, $30,000 to build a unit, then that's what you would be paying into a fund. If you didn't do it yourself, if you didn't do it there.
Well, the Affordable Housing Trust, as Melinda said, supports the use of this formula. They think it makes sense. And on that phone call, I asked about what about, having this qualifier that says the board can, at its discretion, approve something smaller. And so Melinda didn't mention this tonight, but in that call, there was some discussion about giving the board some guidance as to how much smaller, how much discretion
Yeah.
it would have. Anybody have any thoughts about that? We can come back to this.
I mean,
What if-
my feeling
ahead.
is it's impossible to predict what the circumstances are going to be. And I always err on the side of caution, and I would prefer that it be a little more discretionary for the board so that depending on what the circumstances may be, they could still make it work. I mean, I think anybody reading this is going to see the intent. And unless there's some special circumstances that should warrant a smaller amount, I think the intent is pretty clear what the contribution should be with the formula.
Okay.
I like the language as it stays right now. I feel what we do in Milton a lot of the times is we box ourselves in. We have to either rewrite the zoning to make an actual project work, and we have no flexibility. And I mean, a good example is the last article that we just talked about, the amendment to Hendry's, strict compliance. I mean, it leaves no discretion whatsoever for what may possibly be in the future. And we don't know the variations on projects that could come forward in the village are huge. I mean, there's so many things we can't even contemplate now. So I would lean towards keeping it a little bit more discretionary in the event that there's something that's a high priority for the town, but can't make
So,
it happen.
okay, so keeping this amendment, the way it's amended. Okay.
Yeah.
Denny, yeah?
So I agree with April. I just hate to go below 12%.
Well, this won't allow going below. This is
This
just
won't
for
allow-
this
okay,
is
this
just
would
for the
allow-
bonus part, right?
Okay. As long as we don't go below 12%, I don't mind discretion.
Okay.
Agreed. Yeah, I agree.
Richard, okay, so everybody's in agreement of
Okay.
this, leaving this the way it is. The way it is on the screen, I should say.
Yep.
Okay. Alex had some, on the historic preservation, he again, consistent with his other comments, has wanted this language to be more restrictive. I have the same reservations I've had consistently about doing that. So I have not modified it much. I don't know if anybody wants to talk any further about his comments about, I did say here under in the third paragraph, it's clarify a bit that the purpose is not just to encourage, right? By taking out the words to encourage and adding those words as required in that historic preservation incentive. So I think making that a little clearer. But so I haven't added anything else. Does anybody wish to add anything more restrictive in the historic preservation?
No.
We've talked about this before, when we had our in-person meetings.
Yep.
If there's no further,
I just, so I'm sorry, because he has so many.
and there's a lot. That's why
so
I
many
tried
documents at this
That's
point.
why I tried to tie them back to his
I'm
comments.
so grateful you did that. Yeah, on the most recent thing, I did think the requirement, he said the requirement for historic preservation should apply to any building constructed before 1930. I thought that was good, but I'm not sure if that applies to here. I'm sorry.
Well, my concern about tying a building to a year is, if it's been modified and altered so much since that year it was built, there may be very little there, and now all of a sudden you're requiring it to be preserved. So let's say, let's just say that, that citizens building that's, that I pointed out earlier, I think it's built in probably in the 50s or something, but let's just say that was a 1930 building. And let's say it's been modified, and it was beautiful in 1925, but it was modified to look like it is now. Because it was originally built in 1925, now it has to be kept. And, you know, it just leaves less flexibility. So it boxes us in more, to April's point about on the previous one. I mean, this would box us in more. So that's why I think it's clear what we're trying to achieve. We don't have to give a bonus. And if the real protection needs to, as we've said before, come through a historic district, a local historic district, adoption of that.
In the actual bonus under this provision is discretionary for the board to approve or disapprove.
Correct.
Yeah, so I mean, it
Okay.
doesn't require us to do anything, but I do think in certain circumstances, like Cheryl said, it could render a project infeasible that the town would otherwise like to see. I mean, that Citizens Building, I think there could be better uses of that space, or maybe not for the use per se, but the building could certainly be expanded and or changed. And if, you know, we require them to preserve the first floor of that, even though there's really no historic value, it could render some other really, really good project that everybody loves, you know, financially infeasible or structurally infeasible. And I mean, if we're just talking about the bonus, I don't see why we shouldn't have some discretion there.
Well, his comments also talk about making historic preservation of the existing buildings a requirement, even without the bonus. And again, I have the same comment about that that I made earlier.
We've talked about that a number of times, and you know, I just think that you really have to worry about doing something that's so strict that it becomes a takings claim by somebody. So I would be concerned about requiring, you know, using shall instead of, you know.
I mean, my concern has been striking the right balance to make this a tool that will be used and not have it be something that's just going to sit there.
Because these are really small sites. They're
Right.
really expensive to develop, and there's a lot of grade and other things. I mean, I just think if we really want to see, you know, the most productive use of these spaces, we have to have some flexibility, and this is just relating to the bonus. This provision anyways.
Okay, so I mean, the other thing to remember is that the primary historic buildings here already have the amount of floor area that they would be allowed in this overlay. So there's no financial incentive to tear down a historic building to build less than what you've got right now and to have to provide parking that you don't have to provide right now in your existing building. So if we use 1 Elliott, 1 Adams, or the Masonic Building as examples, because even with this zoning, they wouldn't be able to replace the size buildings that they have. So that would make no financial sense. Any further discussion about the historic?
I had just done some grammar changes on that last paragraph. It's not substantive, it's just, the sentence was kind of a mess, but that's just grammar.
Okay. All right. So we'll move past to the very end of the design standards. Alex made a good point about the way this was worded, and so I made those changes. Any thoughts about that?
Oh, it's good.
I just added, these were just sort of grammar type things here. And then this is back to that calculation of the, I mean, Alex had comments about this, I think, being convoluted, and we heard from Melinda and the Affordable Housing Trust comments about that previously.
Yep.
Okay, and then another good point raised by Alex was to add language about Milton resident preference or Milton town employee preference. And then you've added something here.
Yeah, take that out, forget it.
Okay, so we're deleting this.
I think that's an improvement for the town employees.
Okay. This is for me to note to myself, okay. All right, so parking again, we did have that parking analysis done by Beta. So I did not feel compelled to change the parking. Does anybody wish to change the parking requirements, minimum parking requirements?
No.
Okay,
I
April,
know
see.
I'm in the minority. I do understand I'm in the minority, but I do think it's always wise to be able to start at a higher number and have the ability to reduce for a good reason, as opposed to giving it away. Alex made a point that I hadn't even thought of, that we assume that trolley is always going to be there, but we don't know. We just don't know with the way the world is changing so fast right now. These are points that we may or may not have to deal with down the road. So I like the idea of flexibility. So
Okay.
I'm sorry, I have a bug that's driving me crazy.
Okay. Well,
Guess it's summer.
I was laughing about the bug, not your comments about the parking. On the parking, I mean, I still believe, and I've done a lot of reading about this in the last year or so, that developers are going to propose what they think they need for a successful project. If we had on-street parking in Milton, this might be a different conversation, because in neighborhoods and other communities that have resident parking on the street, having minimum on site might put pressure on those, curbside spaces. But since we don't have that and we don't allow overnight parking on the street, the applicant's going to have to either achieve it on site or come up with an off-site arrangement that we find acceptable. And I think that if we're going to kick these projects out of financial feasibility by requiring too much parking, it's going to be too expensive to build it. In fact, a developer who looked at this zoning that came out of the MPIC recommendations, which remember had higher numbers for these, when I asked him what he thought about this change, he said, this makes it viable. And so that's stuck with me. And having looked at how these sites in terms of doing my own feasibility analysis or, sort of testing out how I might design for it, there's just no way to make anything work without having some kind of structure for parking. And if you just make it all parking, it's just not going to be worthwhile. So
we've had this discussion on and on and on and on and on. And,
okay,
I think our language is fine.
All right. So given that Denny's comments are noted, Rich, do you have any comments you've heard from everyone else?
Nope, no addition.
Okay. So we're going to move on and leave this as is. Again, Alex made some good suggestions relative to this actually being a application requirements and splitting them into separate paragraphs for ease of readability. So I thought, and also I used the opportunity to reorganize them so that they're more sort of topic related in order. And then on the paragraph B, having more language about the historical commission seemed reasonable to me. Anybody have any concern about that added language?
Nope.
The green parts are just, sorry, Denny, go ahead.
I think that's a good addition. Thank you.
Okay, and the greens are just reorganized, as I said, so that we're talking about historic together. And then talking about the impacts together. I didn't think it was necessary to add specific reference to the traffic impact mitigation because it's elsewhere in the zoning, but does anybody disagree with that?
Nope.
Okay. And then, again, this is just sort of splitting that requirement out on G. I added a few things in H. And then, yeah, again, the others are kind of more just how it's organized. Okay, so any other thoughts about that?
What's that last one about the reference?
About, I'm sorry, about the
MGL reference?
Yeah, so that I asked Kathleen about. So Kathleen?
Oh, yeah. So it's, I looked up the statute and it's the one that says that you can use consultant fees, you can charge consultant fees. And so it says that if you have it in your bylaw provision, then you can have this sort of special fund that you can use for consultants fees. So I didn't understand why Alex thought we shouldn't have it in there. I think it should be because we don't have a general bylaw that says that we can collect consulting fees. So I think we have to put it in every time we've got a special, zoning district.
And that's for peer review and what have you?
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And it just sort of talks about where the, the money can be collected and put into a designated fund for that purpose.
Mm-hmm.
I just couldn't see any reason why we should take it out.
I'm standing there making comments and I didn't realize I was muted. I think it's in the rules and regs. That's one. And two, town meeting does go and make that vote. It's usually in our yearly town meeting.
So we don't need it?
No. I say leave it there, but we have used it in the past and we use it by making that vote at town meeting. So leave it in here.
Yeah, I think it should be there. And I don't see the big problem about having it there.
Belt and suspenders.
Exactly.
Okay, so we made it through. And
We made it through.
I will make
Oh,
this.
and I was sorry for looking at something else, but actually I was checking on a special permit that one of my affordable housing clients got in another town, and it's 18 units and 18 parking spaces. So it's 1 for 1.
Yeah, that's pretty standard
Yeah.
in this kind of zoning district. And honestly, that's what we have in our entire C residential single family dwelling.
Yeah, and this project is in a downtown district as well. I mean, sort of like this, like small mixed residential and commercial.
So I'll make those 2 changes that we discussed, and then we'll have this as a red line still, so people can follow the changes, and have Bill or Allison post this on the town website, and then
Can I just make one more point about the parking? I mean,
sure.
People realize that the entire residency district in Milton only requires 1 spot per unit. No, not always next to transit. And that's a huge part of our housing stock is in residency zone.
Right.
I only need to have 1 parking spot. So this isn't like a completely unfounded rationale, especially when we are talking about a site that's directly abutting transit. Sorry. Just want to make sure that we get that point across because I don't people know.
Okay, so what I think process-wise, we'll have, as I said, have this posted. We'll have opportunity for comment at our next meeting. And then we will hopefully vote then at our next meeting to submit this to the select board along with the 2 companion articles that we're not changing, which are setting up those 2 funds.
Yep.
And then we will also resubmit the Great Estates PUD amendment that we sought. That was pulled as well, right? So those are the articles that were pulled from the June town meeting.
Great.
I have a question.
Sure.
In relation to town meeting, so we're going to have a June town meeting, a July town meeting. Are we still going to have an October town meeting?
No. My understanding is that with the election, the clerk said that it would be more managed with the primary and the national election in the
Right.
fall, that she wouldn't be able to do an October town meeting. So I watched some of the select board meeting, they were talking about the July timeframe, or it would have to kick to December.
Right, you're looking at December, January.
Yeah. So,
In-person town meetings like we always have?
sorry?
Those are going to be in-person town meetings like
Right now they're talking about remote, but there's possibility that they could be in person with proper distancing. So my understanding from watching the meetings has been they're talking about in the field house or on the field in that scenario, but they're also looking into the remote, but they're waiting for legislation that would have to be passed in order to do it remotely.
The expectation at this time is that it will be a virtual town meeting in June, and they expect the same to happen in July. There is legislation that should be being passed this week between the governor's office and the legislature that would allow that virtual meeting to take place. And we're not alone. This is the vast majority of communities in the state.
So one of the things I think I mentioned at our last meeting was the idea of the webinar is just to give town meeting members an opportunity to learn about this zoning and to ask questions prior to the town meeting, because it could be hard to do. So we can talk about the detail of that since we don't have it on the agenda tonight. We can talk about the detail of that webinar, how we want to do it, I think at our next meeting. So you can give some thought to that. One idea would be a panel. One idea would be broadcasting it live. Another would be that it would be recorded, and then you could have a webinar that after town meeting members watch the recording. So just things for people to think about between now and 2 weeks when we have our meeting.
I think the other part to that would be the frequently asked questions that we're going to attempt to get the questions from people so that we can find out what their issues are so that that panel can address those questions. So once we take and put this particular zoning onto the web, people have something to look at and something to question. And I know that there was a lot of support for the webinar, both from the select board and moderator Hiss.
Okay, great. So one thought too would be who would we invite others to participate, such as a member of the Master Plan Implementation Committee or the Affordable Housing Trust or the Historical Commission. Give that some thought too. Okay, so anything else on the Milton Village? So we had one more thing on the agenda, so I will see if folks want to cover it now or want to defer it, and that's the condo conversion bylaw revisions. And thank you, Kathleen, for working on those. Did you want to give us an overview, Kathleen, or do you want to wait to do that? Up to you folks.
Well, I don't know that anybody's had a chance to read it, but what I just would, so I just sort of throw it out there that what I did was take the one that we had and retyped it and then organized it in a way that I thought made more sense in terms of reading to see what, you know, what the criteria were, what the application has to include. And so I think it's more workable, but I would really ask people to look at it and, you know, think about what comments you might have. I think I'd like to get your feedback to see whether or not you think it works. The idea behind it is to say that, you know, we have these two 40B projects that we have because I think to a certain extent, the owners of these properties felt that they didn't have any other options. And so what I was thinking about was a way to sort of allow these condo conversions of these larger houses in a way that would, you know, provide additional housing space, but wouldn't be 130 different units. That there would be sort of more ability to to save these properties and use this bylaw in a different way. The one that we had on our books is really just designed, I think, for the Burr estates, and that's it. And it doesn't really work for anything else. And so that's what I really took a look at, was a way to sort of adapt it to make it more flexible.
I know that the Affordable Housing Trust and the Housing Committee is interested in this, and the condo conversion actually was something, modifying what we have was something that was recommended in the master plan. So I think it's good for us to take it up. One thing I received an email from Joe Sloan today. He's unable to attend our meeting tonight. I will forward it to everyone. He did have a concern about what he has seen, where more of property is being paved for parking, and a two-family having a exterior stair taking up space, so that the amount of open space available on a property is being reduced quite a bit. So I know something I mentioned before to Kathleen is that to try and consider how we can put in an open space requirement as a tool to make sure we don't get too much proposed on the property. So I'll just throw that back out there for consideration, and I'll send Joe's email to everyone. All right, so, and one thing you didn't mention, Kathleen, I know you told me, was that you've researched and other communities to see what they have, and you didn't find a lot, right?
Well, no, actually, I looked at 10 or 12 different communities that had condominium conversion bylaws. Most of them weren't as detailed as ours. Lots of them were a lot simpler. But I did find 10 or 12 different examples in the greater Boston area that I looked at.
Okay.
But I did try to, I kept most of the things that we had required. I just sort of organized them in a different way to sort of say that, you know, starts out with what kinds of qualifications a parcel has to have. And then next, what you would be putting into your application.
Should we add something that would set criteria for a future board to consider, like, for example, the open space, or how much additional square footage might be added, or how much additional land per unit, not so that it can kind of guide what would get built? Do you think you've got that in paragraph F there?
Well, I mean, in paragraph B, it sort of says the total number of dwelling units, you know, shall reflect the historical and architectural elements of the structures, and, you know, and compatibility with the predominant architecture of the surrounding neighborhood. So you could sort of throw something in there. But I'm also thinking that it's not just the great, you know, the great estates that have. Sometimes these properties, they're large houses that are actually in Residence C.
Oh,
and
understood.
so
Yeah.
they don't, we've had situations before the ZBA where, you know, it's in Residence C, and it's like a house and then an old carriage house or whatever. And so, you know, you don't want to be putting an open space requirement in there when there isn't any open space on the property to begin with.
So I have a thought. What do you think about having Bill, having you or Allison call or send out emails through your listserv to see those 8 or 10 or 12 communities, what they've seen in results from their condo conversion bylaws? I think I'd be interested to see, you know, whether they've been getting good results from it, like, you know, or is it achieving what they thought it would achieve?
Well, I'm not on the the town council's listserv anymore.
But Bill's on a planner's listserv.
Yeah.
Bill, what do you think about that?
I have to apologize. My earbuds are the way that I'm hearing the audio, and I'm getting signals that they're gonna die from loss of battery.
Okay.
So I have to upgrade my equipment for our next meeting. But I wanted to thank Kathleen for taking a stab at this. I thought it was clearer, or maybe because I was thinking about it more since the last version. I did like number 3, you know, in the on the first page, more than 50% of the total number of dwelling units will be contained in existing structure or structures. I like that because it gives a sense of a limit to, you know, the number, but I think there's going to be a concern from the public that people have bought into their neighborhoods thinking that they were going to be living with houses, and they're not going to necessarily like the idea that they could have, you know, that it could turn into condos everywhere. So, so that I thought that was a really good step in beginning to address that concern. So I'm also trying to think of other ways to address that concern. Because I was looking at different lots, and you know, if this house had a house and a coach house and a garage or a barn, then and you only need 900 feet for a unit, you could have, you know, 4, 2, 2. That's a lot. So then you have 8. That's 16 units, where somebody's used to just seeing kind of a house and 2 exterior units. And then if they, through assemblage, you know, they get the lot next to them, you're looking at twice that many. So anyway, I was just trying to imagine it in place, and I was trying to think of ways that it could be used in the way that it's intended. So as Kathleen said at the beginning of her presentation, we're just beginning to look at this. So I just wanted to share that feedback, that I'm reading and thinking about it as I get these versions.
I think actually a couple of examples, you know, if we had examples and we test them. So like, I remember that, I think one of the ones that came to the Board of Appeal was on Central Ave. I don't remember the exact address, but it's a big house. And I think Bill probably has them. There's a couple of big houses as you get towards Elliott Street there. And even if we took a couple of these that are the 40B, just as sort of test cases, you know, to see how this would apply on those properties.
Well, that's, I mean, as I said, I really, when I was envisioning it, a couple of things that I had in mind were a redevelopment I did years ago in Belmont, that was an existing structure with sort of townhouses that were added to it. Dedham has done one that's a existing estate with townhouses and additional dwellings. And then also thinking about the Canton Ave site for the 40B, you know, there is all that back land behind the house. I mean, what could you have done there that would have been more sensitive than the application that's been submitted to Mass Housing? So those are the kinds of properties that I had in mind, and trying to think about what, and we also have this age requirement that it has to be something that's older than 1970. And I would think that people, going to Denny's point, you know, would be receptive to the idea that these older houses that they live next to and love could be preserved in a way that they can't right now.
Okay, so given that Denny's earbuds are going to run out, battery, and that we're all going to give this some more thought, and Bill, maybe you can send out an email through the listserv, see what other communities have experienced, and we'll pick it up again in 2 weeks, okay? Sound good,
Thank
everyone?
you.
Yep. Yes.
Okay, so given that, then I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Thank you. Second.
Okay, all those in favor, we're just going to say it. Aye.
Bye.
Bye.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thanks. Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Bye.